Today, let's talk about first impressions. First impressions are an important part of starting a new relationship. Making a good first impression helps smooth the way and make sure you get what you want out of the relationship going forward. But why do we use first impressions? What makes us evaluate another person and form an opinion about them based on nothing more than a quick glance and maybe a hello and a handshake? There's a very good reason we form and use first impressions. It's called human survival. Back in the day, and to some extent today, we had to be able to make a very quick assessment to decide if someone approaching us was a friend or a foe. The quicker that first impression was made, the more time there was to decide to run away, fight, or stay and greet the stranger. I'm sure you can see how this would have been a useful skill to develop. Since it was so closely tied to our survival as a species, it comes no surprise that it's hard-coded into our DNA and a skill we still have to this day. In other words, we have a long history of making quick decisions based on first impressions. In this day and age, these same skills still serve us well. We may not rely on them for survival much anymore in our day-to-day life, but they still serve an important purpose. Since we all make those split decisions about another person when we first meet them, it's important to try to make a good first impression. Now, while that isn't always possible, you'll save yourself a lot of headaches and extra work if you can prepare and do your part to make that good first impression. Pay attention to how you dress and present yourself. Do a little research about the person you're meeting ahead of time when you can. Check and adjust your body language if needed, and don't forget to smile. Be open and friendly. Little things like this will go a long way towards making a good first impression. Of course, not everything is completely under our control, and to be perfectly honest, sometimes we just mess up. It happens. We're human, right? That's what the rest of this video is all about. While it isn't always easy to overcome a bad first impression, there are some things you can do. Let's start by taking a closer look at why it's so hard to overcome a bad first impression. We would like to think that people always look for the best in us and give us the benefit of the doubt. And while that can happen after we've made a good first impression and started to establish a closer relationship, that isn't true when you mess up from day one. Here's the big problem with making a bad first impression. It shades all subsequent contacts. Here's what I mean by that. When we first meet someone and they make a great first impression as a kind and trustworthy person, going forward, we tend to always think of them that way. It takes a lot of mess-ups to change this opinion of the person. We forgive, we overlook, we still continue to think of them as basically nice people. In our eyes, they are simply good people who make mistakes. Now, when that first impression is a bad one, it works the same way, but against the person who we've judged to be unreliable, for example. Even when they turn out to be kind and solid people down the road, we'll always have doubts, and it's hard to completely trust them. The same holds true when you make a bad first impression. It carries through the entire rest of the relationship. Another big problem is that a bad first impression can sometimes be the end of the road. As much as we'd like people to give us a second chance, sometimes they don't. When you mess up and don't do your best to make a good first impression, you could be losing out on some great opportunities and friendships with some amazing people. When you do get a second chance to turn things around, it can be quite an uphill battle because of the doubts which remain that I talked about earlier. I'll share some tips for overcoming that next, but for now, let's mentally prepare for when this happens. It will happen. You need to realize that you have to work hard at overcoming that bad first impression. It may take some time, and until you can convince the other person that this initial impression was wrong, you're not always going to be treated fairly, or at least in the way you would hope to be treated. This can be quite discouraging. Realizing that the person behind it is the shadowing of that bad first impression can help to not take it all that personally and keep plugging away at proving them wrong. In the end, it can be well worth the time and effort. Frankly, it feels good when you overcome this challenge and show the other person that they were wrong in their initial assessment of you. Now let's talk about what to do in more detail. So let's get to the actionable part that you've been waiting for. Let's find out what we can do to overcome a bad first impression. Keep in mind what I shared with you earlier, and then let's get to work. Your first step should always be to stop and analyze what went wrong. Sometimes it's obvious. It's sticking out like a sore thumb. At other times, you have to dig a little deeper to find out what went wrong. Also, keep in mind that what seems obvious isn't always the real reason you made a bad first impression. Take a little time to really think about what happened. Go through it in your mind until you feel that you have a pretty good idea of what happened and how you were perceived. If you had someone you knew well there with you, ask them what they saw and what they thought went wrong. If not, hashing it out and explaining what went on to a close friend can also help you get a second opinion and a more detached view of what happened. With that information, it's time to come up with an action plan to overcome that bad first impression. Now, since you know what went wrong and what incorrect impression they got of you, you can focus on proving them wrong on exactly those things. For example, if you ended up being late through no fault of your own, and the impression is that you're not good about being on time, prove them wrong by always getting everywhere a little earlier and doing everything you can to show and prove that you're reliable. Go the extra mile. Arrive 30 minutes early, just in case. Do whatever it takes and keep plugging away at that uphill battle. You're in this for the long run, right? Now, you also need to keep showing consistently and repeatedly that you're better than that first impression. And remember to focus a lot on the part that you messed up with. Be prepared to work for a better perception, and above all, be patient. Now, of course, this isn't something you'll be doing every single time you make a bad impression. Use the strategy for when it's worth the effort. If you make a bad first impression with a potential new referral partner that you know you could get business from, it is definitely worth it. Do it. Not only for a better relationship, but also when it comes to growing your business and helping other people. At other times, it's easier sometimes just to cut your losses. If you make a fool of yourself meeting some people that you'll never see ever again, and there's no potential for you to help each other, just move on, forget about it. In that case, it likely isn't worth the time and effort to change their opinion. It's sometimes easier to just go for another group of people or different potential referral partner. So let's wrap this up with a quick reminder that it's much easier to go the extra mile to make sure a first impression is a good one rather than fixing a bad one later. That being said, when it does happen, and it will happen, it's an important business relationship, there is a way to work through it in most cases. Occasionally, someone will refuse to give you a second chance, but more often than not, you will get that shot. Make the best of it and show them how much they misjudged you. What's your most embarrassing first impression moment, and did you fix it? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching.